I'm gonna put every single fruit in Blox Fruits in a tier list, and I'm gonna be ranking them to decide which fruit is best. I'm gonna be ranking these fruits on one thing: PvP. Okay, starting off with the rocket fruit. This fruit costs $5,000 and it straight up sucks for PvP. The only good thing with this fruit is that you can fly with it, and for that reason I'm gonna be putting it in E tier, because at least you have a move where you can fly with it. Okay, next up we have the spin fruit. Now the spin fruit has a lot of offensive abilities, but it does no damage. Now the same thing as the rocket fruit, it has a flying ability, so just for that reason I'm going to be putting it in E tier as well. Next up we have chop. Now this fruit also belongs in the dumpster, but at least it has a flying ability, and the only reason why I'm going to be putting it in D tier is because it's immune to sword slashes, so that's really good in PvP. It has no good offensive abilities, but only a really good defensive ability. Next abomination of a fruit, we have spring. Spring costs $60,000. Now spring could be a good fruit if you're a swordsman and you use the spring leap ability to use it as a movement ability, but as a standalone fruit, it's straight up garbage. Now just because of its movement ability, I'm going to be putting it in E tier. Now next up we have bomb. Bomb is an okay fruit since one of its move does a lot of damage, which is the self-destruct, the V move, but other than that it doesn't have any movement abilities. Just because it doesn't have any movement abilities like the other common fruits, I'm gonna have to put it in F tier. After that we have smoke. Now smoke is a good fruit if you're fighting low levels with no aura. Like honestly, you're not gonna beat anyone in PvP with this terrible fruit, so just don't waste your money on this. For that reason, I'm going to be putting it in E tier, just because you're immune to low level players. Now the final common fruit that we have to rank on this list is spike. Now the only reason you would use this fruit for PvP is if you're trying to look like Sonic the Hedgehog. Like I don't get anyone who would use this fruit for PvP unless you're just trying to troll someone. For the terrible moveset, I'm going to have to put this fruit in F tier. Okay, so now we're moving on to the uncommon fruits. Starting off with Flame V2. So Flame V2 is a decent fruit in PvP, but it lacks in damage, AoE, and speed. For that reason, I'm gonna put it in D tier. Next up, we have Falcon. You can buy this fruit for $300,000. What a waste of money. This fruit is probably the worst uncommon fruit there is. It has a really small range and small AoE attacks. Now I'm gonna rank this fruit in E tier just because you have a flying ability. Next up, we have Ice V2. Now Ice V2 is a really good fruit because of all its stun abilities. However, it's not a really good standalone fruit. You need to use a sword or a gun to do maximum damage with it. But because of all its stunning abilities, I'm going to put it in C tier. Moving on, we have Sand V2. Now Sand V2 is an interesting fruit since it's decent in PvP, but the moves are really hard to land. There's a reason why we don't see a lot of people using this fruit in PvP. Just for that reason, I'm going to have to put it in D tier. Next up, we have Dark V2. Now Dark V2 has really good stun abilities and has a really good. However, it sucks as a standalone fruit, so it would be better if you paired up with a sword. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to put it in D tier too. Next up, we have Diamond. So this fruit is probably the worst fruit to PvP within Blox Fruits. I mean, it just sucks. It has no good offensive ability. It has a defensive ability which gives you extra health, but it's just like a worse version of Buddha. At that point, just get Buddha. So this stinker has to go in a F tier. Okay, so now we're finally moving up to the rare fruits. Next fruit we have is Light V2. So Light V2 has a really high skill cap. So depending on the player, it can be really good or really bad. I've seen players with 30 million bounty mastering this fruit, and I've seen really low level players playing with it and they suck with it. I'm gonna have to class it in B tier, but depending on the player, it can go up to A tier. Okay, next fruit on the list we have Rubber. So Rubber is immune to any rumble attack. It does decent damage and is decent in PvP. However, it lacks in range, so I'm gonna have to put it in D tier. Okay, so next up we have Barrier. So Barrier used to be a really good PvP fruit back in the days. However, now you have so many other options for fruits, so there's just not a reason to get Barrier. It lacks in damage and in speed. For that, I'm gonna have to put it in E tier. Moving on to the next fruit on the list, we have Ghost. So the only reason anyone would use Ghost is for the revive ability. There's no other reason to use this fruit because it just lacks in everything. So for that, I'm gonna have to class it in E tier. Now for the final rare fruit, we have Magma V2. So Magma V2 has really good moveset. It does a lot of damage and it's pretty good in PvP. However, it just lacks in speed, so I'm gonna have to put it in C tier. Okay, so for our first legendary fruit, we have Quake. Now Quake has really good moveset for PvP. It has high AoE, high damage. It's a little bit slow, so I'm gonna have to put it in B tier. Next up, we have Buddha V2. Now Buddha V2 as a standalone fruit is pretty good for PvP. However, if you pair it up with a sword, it's an immediate S tier fruit. Next up, we have the Love Fruit. The Love Fruit has an an okay moveset for PvP, but I'm gonna rank it as C tier because of all the stun abilities it has. Moving on, we have the spider fruit. So this fruit is extremely underrated for PvP. I don't see it used as much as often as before. It has a solid moveset for PvP and it does a lot of damage. If you have really good aim, you should use this fruit for PvP. I'm gonna have to rank this fruit a C tier. Next up, we have the sound fruit. So the sound fruit is extremely annoying to go up against because it can easily break your instinct. Even though the moves don't do a lot of damage, it's just a really annoying fruit to go up against. So I'm gonna give it a C tier. Okay, next up we have Phoenix V2. So Phoenix V2 used to be so much better before, but it got hella nerfed. Now the moves lack damage, they lack speed, so it's an okay fruit. So I'm just gonna have to class it in C tier. Next up we have Portal. So Portal is an amazing standalone fruit and it's even better with a sword. This fruit has great mobility and crazy damage, so this goes straight to S tier. Next up we have Rumble V2. So Rumble V2 is a really good fruit for PvP. It has really good stun abilities, it has a really good moveset for PvP, and overall it's just really good. But just because it lacks in speed, I'm gonna have to put it in B tier. Next fruit on the list we have Pain. So the only reason you would use Pain for PvP is because of the self-repel move, which is the mobility move. There's literally no other reason you would use this fruit because this fruit sucks for PvP. The only good thing about this fruit is the mobility move, so I'm gonna have to put it in D tier. Moving on, we have the Blizzard fruit. So this fruit has really high AoE moves, which does okay damage. So this fruit is a decent fruit for PvP. So I guess I have to class it in C tier. Moving on, we have our first mythical fruit and probably the worst mythical fruit in Blox Fruits. We have Gravity. Now Gravity is a terrible fruit for PvP. No one ever uses this. It's very slow, it lacks damage, it doesn't have high AoE moves, and overall there's just no reason to use this fruit. So I'm gonna have to class this as an E tier. Next up we have the Mammoth fruit. So the Mammoth fruit is extremely good in PvP. The moveset is crazy good, the M1s do a lot of damage, high AoE moves, and it's extremely fast for its size. So I'm gonna have to class this in A tier. The next fruit we have is the T-Rex fruit. So this fruit does a lot of damage. The moveset is really good for PvP and it has a lot of combo potential. If it was a little bit faster, I would rank it in S tier, but for now it's gonna go in A tier. Moving on to Doe V2. Now this fruit is an absolute S tier. You can easily one-shot combo someone using this fruit. It's a really versatile fruit. You could easily reach 30 million bounty only using this fruit. Up next we got the Shadow fruit. So this fruit's a bit hard to rank because the moveset is a bit bad for PvP. However, the final move, the V move, has a really good stun ability. If you were to pair up this fruit with a sword, you could easily win PvPs. But as a standalone fruit, I can't rank it that high. I would put it as a B tier. Next up we have Venom. So Venom is a really underrated fruit in PvP. It does a lot of damage and a lot of poison damage. The moveset is really good and in the right hands it's extremely lethal. I'm gonna have to rank this in A tier. On to the next we have Control. So Control is a really fun fruit to use in PvP, but the moves are really hard to land, and also when the moves land they don't do much damage. So honestly it should probably belong in C tier. Up next we have Spirit. So every single one of Spirit's moves are really good for PvP. One of them does burn damage, one of them stuns, and the final move does a lot of damage. While using this fruit you can easily perform a one-shot combo, so this fruit easily goes up to S tier. Alright, next up we have Dragon. So Dragon used to be really OP back in the days, but now it just seems like it can't compete with the S tier fruits. The moves are not fast enough and they don't deal enough damage, but it's still a really spammable fruit that can win you PvPs easily. As of right now, Dragon belongs in A tier. Moving on, we have Leopard. And now if you main Leopard, you're one of the best players in the world. I main Leopard and I can tell you this fruit is super easy to use and extremely spammable. I can easily win PvPs against 30 millions without a problem. Honestly, if you have low bounty in Blox Fruits, all you gotta do is get Leopard and you can easily win all your PvP matches. This fruit easily goes up to S tier. Now for the final fruit, we have the rarest, most expensive fruit in the game, Kitsune. So Kitsune probably has the best moveset of any fruits. It's extremely spammable, super easy to use and master. It's got stun abilities and you can always run away if you're losing a PvP match. Clearly this goes up to S tier. Now here's a final look at every fruit on my tier list. If this video gets 7 likes, I'm gonna rank every sword in Blox Fruits. You better subscribe.